Afternoon, everybody. I'm Peter Lindstrom, Chair of the Environment Committee. It's 4 o'clock on December 10th, so I will call the meeting to order. We do have a quorum. We've got a couple of things on the agenda today, and so without objection, we can move forward with today's agenda. We do have some minutes from November 12th, 2024. Is there a motion to approve those minutes?
Move approval.
Motion and seconded. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, nay. Carries. Nothing on the consent agenda today, and one item on the non-consent business agenda, and that's 2024-313 master contracts for cultural assessment and planning services. This is contract 24P194. Mr. Remus, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, council members. For the record, my name is Chris Remus. I'm an assistant manager in Interceptor Engineering, and today I'm here to present the item as read by the chair. So the scope of services for this solicitation, it was for cultural planning and assessment services work. The majority of this work, the primary need is to support the capital program with evaluation of all sites that require excavation. Some of these tasks can include performing initial desktop assessments once the site is identified, or complete further archaeological evaluations on the site if deemed necessary, and also to support construction activities with both on-call and full-time support if, again, deemed necessary by the initial evaluations. So just a brief summary of the solicitation. The request for proposals was issued on August 12th, 2024. The disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE goal, was set at 15%, and 4 proposals were received on September 25th, 2024, and those 4 companies are listed below. So just a brief evaluation summary of the proposals. The panel members, there were 3 panel members from Environmental Services that served as subject matter experts for the qualifications, evaluations of the proposals. And then once those proposals are evaluated, they're turned over to a negotiations panel that reviews the cost proposals that are submitted from those that are moved forward. And some of the main evaluation criteria is quality of the proposal, the qualifications, experience, and then independent of that, the costs are evaluated by a different panel. So, Mr. Chair, with that, the proposed action today is that the Metropolitan Council authorize the regional administrator to negotiate and execute contracts 24P194A through D for cultural assessment and planning services for a cumulative amount not to exceed $3 million as follows. Stantec Consulting Services Incorporated for 24P194A in the amount of $850,000. HDR Engineering Incorporated, 24P194B in the amount of $850,000. Bolton and Mink Incorporated, contract 24P194C in the amount of $675,000. And the 106 Group, contract 24P194D in the amount of $625,000. And with that, I can be available for questions. Thank you.
Questions for Mr. Remus, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've managed projects that have had this, so could you define what excavation is? So is that after construction, but is it sometimes you have to go potholing and looking around, or you've got some kind of minor investigations that you have to do, geotech, maybe some drilling? So kind of where is that definition of excavation bounded?
Mr. Chair, Council Member, yes, thank you for the question. We think of it as ground disturbing activities. So
Okay.
basically anything that we're turning over soil for borings or pilings, things like that. Construction excavation, we want to evaluate that site and determine if there's further needs or monitoring or things like that before we show up on site.
Perfect. Thank you.
Good question. Other questions? Is there a motion?
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
Motion's been made and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Passes unanimously.
Excellent. Thank you.
Except I didn't say nay, so I think it passes unanimously.
I think you could hear all three of us.
I think so. Very good. Okay, and that takes us to our information item. Imagine 2050 Water Policy Plan. What in the world is that?
You'd be familiar with it by now, Mr. Chair.
Welcome.
Thank you. Hello, committee members. For the record, my name is Jen Kostrzewski. I'm the Assistant Manager of the Water Policy and Planning Group within Water Resources and Environmental Services. Today I get to share about the responses that we received on the Water Policy Plan during the public comment period. I do have some slides additionally, and I printed it out just to see what it looked like in real life. So in addition, there was a report as part of this, which has all of our comments and responses that we have created for this. This is a new slide, and I was excited to use it, so I slipped it into the slide deck. It's not the traditional water policy plan slide. The intention of our water policy plan is to ensure that we have the water that is essential for our environment, our economy, and our public health. And so that was the intention as we crafted this plan with you, and most importantly, with our stakeholders in the region through a lot of different feedback and listening sessions. And so we want to make sure that we are hitting some of these key items that you can see on the slide of promoting universal accessibility to water services and the water benefits. We want to maintain the watershed-based management strategy. We want to encourage collaboration across political boundaries. And we want to make sure at the heart of all of this, we are doing integrated water management and planning when we are starting from the supply all the way through the treatment, because frankly, water is water throughout that entire cycle, and it's our responsibility to be stewards of that for the region. Just another reminder, I'm sure you have now seen this timeline in other committees along the way, but this is where we are as part of the process. We are close to the end. We are finalizing our content, so after we have this conversation about how we made the responses, my staff and I are going to go back, and assuming that you agree with or you give us the direction, we will make the revisions to the plan. And I'll come back in January with a red-lined version so that you can be clear about the changes that we've made in response to these comments that we have received. The comments primarily, because this is focused for the water policy plan, they are focused on the objectives, the policies, and the actions. The values and visions and goals, that is handled in a different committee with a different set of staff. So this is where we're going to be focusing for the water policy objectives, policies, and actions. So who commented? We ended up receiving 111 comments. We received comments from various entities, organizations. We went all the way from federal agencies all the way down to residents, individual residents making comments on our plan. So I think that was highly successful. Of all of the plans as part of the Regional Development Guide, the Water Policy Plan received the smallest amount of comments. And I'm going to give you a choose your own adventure on this one. You can interpret that number as saying that people did not take the time to read the plan or care about water. And I personally reject that because I think water is so important to all of us. Where I will lean into is that we did extensive engagement with folks. And so I think that those comments that we collected along the way were included and incorporated into that language, and so we didn't get as many comments from our stakeholders because they saw what they had already contributed to our plan. When we look at the gender of the folks who have responded, it seems as if men have a lot to think about with water, so 67% of our respondees identify as men. But they were not the only ones. We still have 13% that identify as women, 6% as transgender, and 14% preferred not to answer. We also hit a wide gamut of age ranges, so it wasn't just the middle-aged professional water folks who traditionally comment on these plans. We did a very good job of engaging folks all the way from 18 to 84 years old from these comments. I apologize. I know that this font is small, but luckily I can see it on this big screen here now. This is a graph that shows the different comments or the different topic areas that the comments were focused on. Some comments did apply to multiple areas. So if you do the math and decide to add up all those numbers on this graph, it will be more than 111 because sometimes folks wanted to talk about water quantity and water quality in the same comment, but I wanted to make sure that we gave both of those topic areas the service that they needed for this graph. If we look at the top 3 areas, this is not surprising. We have the most comments for our water supply, second amount of comments for our wastewater, and then the third amount would be for pollution prevention. That actually was when we started the plan. We knew that that was going to be some of the areas that the council had the most authority in, and also a responsibility to ensure that no matter where we were talking about on the water cycle, pollution prevention is very important to the actions that we take and have put into this plan. We did go through and tried to categorize the type of comments that we received in this process. Almost 1 in 5 comments. I'm gonna really play with statistic here. So rounding up to 20% and say 1 in 5 comments were positive feedback in support of either how the plan was created or what the plan content said or the intention of this plan. So we received a big portion of positive feedback, which was very refreshing and kind. It felt good to read those comments. 46% of our comments were folks sharing their general concerns, maybe not making a request for us to make edits, but just reinforcing or sharing what their concerns were. And many of those concerns we had in the plan, so we were able to say thank you. We also agree with you that this is a very good concern. And then the last 35% resulted in minor edits in which we have committed to making revisions into the plan. When we dig into each of those categories, I did pull some example comments here. So we have gotten kudos for providing a framework for integrative planning and management for the region. And this commenter thinks that this framework will help us secure a clean and plentiful water future. Again, there was compliments about the efforts to include multiple perspectives in the development of this plan. We did take an approach this time through with the water supply plan to divide the region into 7 subregions because we knew that there wasn't just a one-size-fits-all approach. And so we got some kudos for taking that approach this time through. We got some positive feedback on the fact that we responding to comments that we received early on and included a new water sector workforce development policy as part of this process. And so we saw some positive feedback about making that policy included in our plan. And lastly, we got a lot of comments, and these are just 2 examples of how we worked with our advisory or how we were able to take collaborative approaches with our stakeholders and our partners out there in the region to create a plan that really, I think, the region can stand behind and hopefully implement in the next 10 years. When we are talking about these general concerns, there were a couple of themes that we identified as part of our analysis of these comments. One concern that I do want to address up front is that there was a concern that the Met Council is taking on new water regulatory authority. And I want to be clear that we have no intention of having more authority, taking on more roles within the water governance of the state. we, I think, have tried to define what our role is, and we will be staying within what our role is defined by statute. Another part that there was a general concern was that water supply would be identified as a system within the council, and I do mean a capital S system for the council's authorities, and that is not the case. We do fully understand that water supply is under local governance and local control, and we just provide resources and technical advice for regional water planning. The rest of these are just general topics like water sustainability, and we needed to have a stronger focus on ecosystems connections. And then there were some specific concerns about the number of liquid waste drop-off sites and that we need more of them in the region, or concerns about our SAC program and what the costs and charges were. And so our general concerns did, again, have a continuum, a wide breadth of concerns, but it was very good to see and help us identify points in which we know that there's enthusiasm or passion in the region that we know we can connect with in the next decade. Some examples of minor edits. This one, we got a comment that said that we made some general assumptions about agricultural uses and that we should be a little bit more specific, that when we are thinking about agricultural water uses, it is beyond just commercial and irrigation, and that there's other uses. And so we're going to go ahead and adjust the plan and provide more robust discussion of the agricultural uses. We received input that generally when we were talking about water supplies, we defaulted to talking about groundwater because 70% of our region's water supplies do come from groundwater, but that doesn't mean that we should not be talking about surface water supplies. And so we're going to be going back through and making sure that we are reinforcing the fact that our water supplies are both above on the surface and below in our aquifers. There are going to be some general map updates and figure updates that we're going to work with our colleagues in communications to make sure that we're getting the right imagery in place. There was a request to make sure that we were adding definitions. I think this is part of like being inside of the water planning world. We use our jargon and forget that we have to define it. So it was a helpful reminder that some of these topic areas we should define just so that we are clear about what we are putting in our plan. There was a conversation, or there were some questions about the fact that we never actually mentioned the MUSA in our water policy plan. And that is because for us, the MUSA is the next level of that is our long-term service area distinction map, or the map that we have for our plans. And so that's how we interpret where the MUSA falls. And so we need to do better of explaining how we got from the MUSA to our long-term service area map. We had some requests for our partners to be named more explicitly. For example, including soil and water conservation districts. We also had a request from some of our partners to clarify what their roles and responsibilities are. So there's a very long table of all the different water actors in our plan. And it wasn't our intention to have that list to be, exhaustive, but there were some key responsibilities that we can definitely add into that table to give the readers a better understanding of how water responsibilities are distributed. There was a request to talk about public-private partnerships, promoting circular economies, thinking about connections with emergency preparedness, and just in general tightening up some of the plan languages, because there's some areas that were open for interpretation that we could tighten to make sure that we are clear about what we are trying to actually say in our plan. And we also know that we took a concerted effort this time to have integrated policy across the different planning areas. And so we know that we still have some connections that we need to work on and get clarity on to move forward. And like we're working with our other partners in the other divisions to truly have this integrated policy. And so we've learned this from this experience through and some of the comments. And so we know that we worked hard with our friends in land use to put water considerations at the heart of their objective one. And so we're going to be working with CD staff to try to support the fact that water and land use are connected and linked in both of our policy plans. So we'll be moving together in those areas, and I think that makes a lot of sense. Likewise, before we start thinking about climate and natural systems, there is a link with water that you just cannot separate when you start talking about those two policy areas. So again, we are going to be working with our colleagues in community development to ensure that we're not asking for repeated minimum requirements in these areas, and that we can hopefully help local planning see these connections between our different policy areas, so that we can have, from the local perspective, also an integrated plan across climate, natural systems, and water. We also have committed to working with housing and the housing policy with regards to our SAC rates and their impacts on affordable housing. And so that's work that we will continue after the adoption of the plan, so we can start trying to encourage, where we can, try to help encourage affordable housing in the region. And then lastly, we know we have work ahead of us of trying to work with our colleagues on the equity task force and trying to figure out and make sure that we are putting equity efforts, especially the anti-displacement and the environmental justice framework, at the heart of the work we do, especially within our capital program. So we know that the policy is a little bit complex. We know we still have some work that we need to figure out. And hopefully we will work on that again throughout implementation as well. I'm sure you wanted to see just how some of these revisions would happen, and this is where I will fully admit my glasses are not that good, and so I am not going to try to read everything on this slide. But I will say, specifically in these different examples, we had, in this case, a specific example identified that we perhaps were a little bit too particular in our language. And we made sure that we made the changes. So you can see in the revision at the bottom of this slide that we did pull out the specific comments about green infrastructure, because not all of our stormwater is handled by green infrastructure. And that was perhaps a little bit too much. We went a little bit too far in our description of how the stormwater systems handle. And so we were able to make this revision. Similarly, this is another example. And so the request was to make sure that we do put the right players listed in the commentary. So again, this is where we looked over the soil and water conservation districts. So we make sure that their role is there, because those are going to be some of our partners that are vital to engaging our agricultural residents and landowners within the region. And then making commitments as to how we can utilize our partners who have existing relationships, because we don't have to start from scratch. It's really taking the collective approach for water planning and working with our partners. For this comment, again, there was a specific request of having a little bit more nuance in our language, and so we have been able to make this adjustment. And then lastly, we had a comment in which the, I'm sorry, now I'm trying to read it. This was the specific instance in which clarification about the MUSA boundary and how we didn't mention it, so we wanted to make sure that we were clarifying this language on here. There are more revisions that we are having in the works. Unfortunately, we are still in the process of making them happen, and we wanted to hear your thoughts before we went too far with revising the plan. And so what are the next steps? Today, we are at the top, so I'm bringing this report to you all for your input on the public comment report and our responses. Tomorrow is another big day. We will be taking the Metro Area Water Supply Plan to our Metro Area Water Supply Advisory Committee and Technical Advisory Committees, MOSAC and TEC, because they have the official authority to approve those plans. And so we need to get MOSAC's, specifically MOSAC's approval for the water supply plan, so that it can come back to you all, so that we can recommend to move the policy plan forward. If you so did want, move the water policy plan forward as one package. If That would happen on January 21st. And then lastly, on February 12th, ideally, we will have the entire plan brought before the council for the question of adoption for the entire regional development guide. Along those ways, you can see in the little bulleted items the different documents or products that we would be bringing to you at those different steps, or to our advisory committee at those different steps.
I just caught this now, but I was going to close out with a report to remind you all of our January schedule. I think it's actually the January 28th meeting.
You
for
are
the
correct.
Environment Committee.
Thank you.
And then we have some time between then and the council full approval in February. Otherwise, we'd be same week. So please plan to be here on the 28th.
Thank you. Thank you for catching
catch.
that, Lisa. This is where I don't know if you know this, but the first week in January starts on a Wednesday, and
Right.
I was counting Tuesdays based on what I saw was the beginning of the. It was my fault. I created this slide. And so with that, offering for questions, if there's anything in this specific slide deck that you want to talk about, we can, or if there was anything in the actual report, I welcome your questions.
Questions for Ms. Kostrzewski, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was reading the comments, and I really appreciated how thoughtful the comments were. So, they were, clearly took some time to write some really detailed comments, focused on what they were looking at. And I am tending to agree with you in that because there was so much regional engagement that people were brought along over the course of a year, that they knew what they were going to see. And so this is kind of a tightening up of things. And then I love the way that you're responding and the way you've captured everything, because I think people will see that their comments are being respected and being answered, and when they can be included, they are being included, and recognizing that the community as a whole has some good ideas. So I appreciate the public and private companies and nonprofits who put in comments, and then the work that you and your staff are doing as well to respond. I think it's a really positive working relationship, so thank you.
I noticed the same thing. That was the theme. I haven't read every single comment out or seen every single letter, but I've seen a bunch of them. And so oftentimes they're starting, thank you for inviting me early in to be part of the process. I was a member of the such and such advisory committee, or we had a conversation 6 months ago, and I appreciate the minor edits, bringing clarity. Those minor edits can make a big difference 3 years from now, right? Well done.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And thank you to everybody who submitted comments and did read every darn word and said, here's where it could be improved in a little or big way.
Thank you.
Other questions, comments? Big vote for Mossack tomorrow. Chair Wolf.
Yeah, I get another 3 hours of this tomorrow.
Luckily, we're lovable, and she kind of likes us. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
All right, and that takes us to the general manager's report.
I think the stealing the thunder is the fact that the process that staff really put a lot of effort into has made quite a difference. And we want to continue to build on that going forward. We need to be united for clean water for future generations. And it takes that investment of getting out there, meeting with people, and engaging with them in a way that they can engage with us. So I'm super excited. And I'm also grateful we're at this point in the manner that we are. I know some folks need to take some rest, some well-deserved rest. So we'll get over this next hurdle, and there's plenty more to do, but this will be a huge milestone. So thank you.
Very good. And with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody.